God is good.
All the time.
And all the time.
God is good.
Do you have any George Orwell fans here? Absolutely. I love George Orwell. What's, I guess I don't know if it's ironic to me or interesting to me is that he was a democratic socialist, which is interesting. Listen, we're all familiar with the feeding of the 5,000, right? That's the one miracle that's in all four of the gospel. That's the only miracle, right? That's in all four. But I'm not really that interested in the miracle per se of the fish and the loaves being divided. I'm more interested in the context, the attitudes, and then the responses. All right, Boxer's my favorite character in Animal Farm. Anyone read Animal Farm? And that's one of those books that you really have to read more than once, I think, to gather. But what was Boxer's perspective? What was his mindset? What was his worldview? How did he approach it? I'll just work harder, right? Things start going bad on the farm. Napoleon's always right, and I'm going to work harder, right? And at night when everyone's sleeping, what's he doing? He's trying to help build the windmill, right? I know it's probably one of the things that you read it. But he's going to, yeah. Jim, you're thinking like high school, maybe the last time you saw this, right? So, that's been at least 15 years. But, he's dragging it, and what happens? Eventually he's foaming at the mouth. And, Now, why am I juxtapositioning Boxer with this picture here? Now, if you had to take a stab, who would you think was the architect on that? This should be a no-brainer.
I believe right.
I knew everyone would say that, and I'm so glad that you guys said that. This looks like it, but it's actually, it was designed for the Farnsworth family, which means nothing to anyone in this room except for people from Illinois. Farnsworth Avenue is up there. You're familiar with Fermilab, right? Up in that area. The Farnsworth farm up there, they had this house designed by a name that you don't know, but he's more influential for architecture than Frank Lloyd Wright. And in fact, not only don't you know his name, you know the phrase that he coined, and I'm going to butcher his name, so I'm going to try to read it. But he is the architect who came up with the phrase that less is, yeah. And, all right, he's a German immigrant. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. That's a big name. So he went by Mies. And he actually taught, so Illinois has their version of MIT, and it's IIT. And he taught architecture, and he designed all the federal buildings in Chicago and all over the world. And no one knows his name, but they know what he said. Less is more. I want you to just kind of let that settle in. Just let that kind of be buried down in there. All right, Mark chapter 6. This is the conclusion of what we looked at a couple of weeks ago when the disciples are sent out, right? The 12 disciples are sent out to preach and to teach and to heal and to cast out demons. The apostles return, Mark 6:30. And they returned to Jesus and they told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest for a while. The word return, probably not the best way to translate that. The word actually means rejoin. To gather together. It's a word that they use for gathering fruit. It's a community word, synago. It's a beautiful word. It's one of my favorite Greek words because of the essence of gathering and coming together. And it has even more depth when you look into the word than assembly, which is what we usually use for church, right? Ecclesia, which was a generic, non-biblical word. It was just used of when councilmen got together, when protesters got together, when whatever. That ecclesia is not a religious word. The synagogue is much more about being gathered together. And so Mark doesn't say they returned like you went to the grocery store and came back. They reconnected with Jesus. They were gone. They did all this great stuff. They're all excited, and Jesus says, or like Rodney would say, I don't know why he does that to you. Jesus said, let's get away from here. There's something I want you guys to know. And you can't do it in the crowd. Less is more. So the major value of this feeding of the 5,000, in my opinion, this idea where they come back together, we live in a culture where we lack nothing. When was the last time you were hungry? When was the last time that you didn't have clean running water? When was the last time you dug an outhouse and had to use that in the middle of the night? I mean, we're only one generation from that, really. It's hard for us to really appreciate this passage because when he feeds the 5,000, these are people that they don't know what it's like to just run through Five Guys and grab a burger. They don't have Tupperware to save their leftovers, right? So a full belly really meant something. And that's hard for us. But there's something that's beyond that that's in the story. And it's going to be really hard for you to hear, and it's going to be very easy for you to reject it and to be mad at me. But we've devalued rest. We've devalued a sabbatical. We've devalued the cycles of work and of recharging. And Jesus tells them, let's go to a desolate place. Let's go somewhere far away. And we've made the mistake in our culture of thinking that when you're non-productive for a period, you're lazy. But Jesus says, come away. Let's go to a desolate place. We've made the mistake of devaluing downtime as if it's unnecessary. We've made the mistake of deciding to always be on. Right? I've read so many studies about people that work and then go home and they're doing more work with paperwork and email and stuff like that. And the idea that you could work remote and disconnect has not been good for the psychology of many Americans. We're always on call. And we bought into the lie that the urgent is what's most important. It's pressing, it's heavy, we gotta have it now. And that's just the message that we're bombarded with over and over. Who likes Cracker Barrel? I love Cracker Barrel food. What's outside every Cracker Barrel store? Rocking chairs. How fast can you go in a rocking chair? How far can you go in a rocking chair? A lot of movement, but you don't get anywhere. That's our culture in a nutshell. As Stephen Covey used to say, you could be climbing the ladder and get to the top and find out what? Wrong wall. Yeah. Thank you. That's where we're at. 1 second, Jonathan. I'll come back to you in just a second. That's what's wrong with our culture, but besides the fact that we bought into that, we're imbalanced. Could we be imbalanced? Paul says in 2 Thessalonians 3, when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, what? Let him not eat. For we hear some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busy bodies. Solomon in Ecclesiastes 5, behold, I see what is good and is fitting to eat, drink, find enjoyment in all the toil which one toils under the sun the few days of his life that God has given him. For this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth, possessions, power to enjoy them, and accept his lot and rejoice in. So this is a gift from God. Still not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with the joy of his life. This implies what? That there is labor, that there is toil, right? If you're going to enjoy the fruits of your labor, that means there has been labor, right? So it's a balance that we have to seek, and I feel like in our culture we kind of lost that sense. And it's difficult. And Jesus says, I want you to rest. I want you to come. It's really what we need most. Anapapo. That's the Greek word for rest. But it's really better translated be refreshed. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will refresh you, is what it literally says. Not just that I will give you rest, as in a break, and you no responsibility, no. I'm going to restore. I'm going to refresh. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And then back again to the New Testament, Revelation 14. I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, blessed are those who die in the Lord God, blessed are these in the Spirit, that they may rest. And there is that rest from the labors for their deeds. Follow them. Jesus says, yes, you guys had a great expedition. Yes, you did all this work and everything, but now, come away, come to a quiet place and rest. And you know what's interesting to me is, back to Mark 6, many were coming and going, they had no leisure to even eat, and they went away from the boat to a desolate place by themselves. So the people on the shore see this, right? And they saw them going and recognized them, and they ran on foot. They're like, we're going to get ahead to the other side. We're going to catch up to Jesus, right? And they get there, and he had compassion, suffering alongside. Because they were like a sheep without a shepherd. It kind of reminds me of that Psalm 23 passage, right? He began to teach them many things, and it grew late. His disciples came to him and said, hey, this is a desolate place. The hour is late. Send them away. That should catch our attention. Verse 36. Send them away. What were they called at the beginning of the paragraph in verse 30? Apostles. Apostle means one who's sent forth, right? Jesus sent out the 12 to teach and to preach and to cast out demons and to heal. And they were sent to the people, and now what are they wanting to do? Send the people away. It's just the opposite of what their calling was, right? So, send them into the villages so they can buy something to eat. Jesus answered, you give them something to eat. Shall we go and buy 200 denarii? That's a dollar's wage. So basically a year's salary almost. 200 days worth of salary. And give them something to eat. He goes, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. They found it, they said, 5, 2 fish. Now it's kind of interesting to watch the wordplay here. He commanded them to sit down in groups on the green grass. So we know what time of year it is. There's only one time of year where the grass is green over there. And they sat down by hundreds and fifties. It's almost like a military organization. But look at this. He said a blessing. Look carefully. He broke the loaves, gave to the disciples, and he divided 2 fish. Is that not interesting? The broke of the bread is the same wording that's used when Jesus breaks the bread at the Last Supper. And then this idea of dividing, they just kept multiplying and multiplying. And they all ate and they were satisfied. And I love leftovers. There's some things that just taste way better the second or third day. Right? We took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000. Send them away, opposite of their mandates. But I love the response of the disciples. And you have to interpret this for yourself. Is it sarcasm or is it confusion? What? Are we going to buy all this? I mean, Judas has got the box. I don't know what's left in there, but that would be a year's salary. Are they confused or are they sarcastic? And again, in their day and age of scarcity, that full belly would have been an immense blessing, which would be hard to handle. A couple more things as we wrap up. It's probably 20,000 people. Mark records 5,000, and he uses, there's two different words he could have used there, but he uses the word andres for men. It says anthropoi for people. So historians tell us it's probably, they counted the 5,000, but they probably had their wives and their children there. So now all of a sudden, it's a lot more people that are being fed with just a little bit. So again, we don't lack the resources or the food that group gathered around Jesus with, but we lack the discipline that Jesus is asking the disciples to take on. The ability to disconnect, to follow those cycles and those rhythms. And here's the hard part. To just leave the crowd, to leave the people, to practice solitude so that you rest in Jesus. Here's why it's hard. It's easier to trust our own abilities than it is to depend on God who we don't see. And I will tell you this, from personal experience, your best is not good enough. You give it your best. You can work your hardest. And you'll never be able to do it. It's only through God. He is the one that makes everything happen. But we don't actually believe that in our culture. We believe if I just act like boxer, if I just work a little bit harder, if I just do more, then it's going to happen. Resting, enjoying solitude, is not effortless. But I'm not endorsing laziness or disconnecting from your responsibilities. Resting in God is a different type of effort because it is the idea that I'm going to trust God's actions more than my effort and ability. And I'll just stop with this. If solitude were easy, everyone would be practicing it. We would see that more often. Those rhythms and cycles of that sabbatical Jesus coming together. Because we think we need to be honest. We think we need to fill every minute of every day of every week with some type of, I don't know, whatever activity it is. And all the while we have learned how to ignore and neglect that which is most important, which is eternity with God. Let's stand.